Sorry to cut you off, Tom Petty. Just a reminder, unfortunately we have to continue as a whole class to remain masked. This is due to the fact that I received emails over the weekend, Friday, Saturday, even early this morning, of positive COVID tests from this class. This class, there were 3 in my next class, and 3 new ones. In my next class, there were 4 new ones. So, remain masked, be courteous, think of others, alright? This is a smaller price to pay than many other prices. So, please just wear a mask so that we can continue that class. Alright? A couple of key reminders. You have a paper due on Friday, right? You put the thesis in a week and a half ago. I got several emails. I don't actually know if it was from this class or not. Probably at least one of them was saying I turned my thesis in to the place where the main paper goes. Just turn it into the thesis spot, write a little note. I turned this in on time, but I turned it in the wrong spot, and that's fine. We'll check it out, okay? I think that most of you have gotten some feedback on that already, on your thesis. If you have not, we discussed that this morning, and you will have feedback by tonight on that thesis. It's not going to be particularly substantive feedback, but if you need more substantive feedback, then email your fellow and they will do that for you, okay? Or if it seems substantive and you still understand to me, and also remember, I always have office hours, right? I have office hours every Monday and Wednesday from 1:30 to 2:30, okay? I know it's only a couple of hours, but if you need to see me another time, you're going to have to make an appointment. Just I teach all day on Mondays and Wednesdays. And this morning, I took my children to daycare because they've been quarantined from daycare for the last 10 days because of COVID in the infant room. And I got there and they said, no, 10 days means tomorrow. And so my husband had to leave his office and come pick the children up and take them until I'm a little flustered wearing the masks. I'm mainly angry at the daycare, not the masks. Alright, let's talk about civil liberties. Civil liberties are distinct from civil rights, which we will discuss next week. Okay? Civil liberties are the personal rights and freedoms that are inherent to being human. Right? Inalienable. Right? Think about that word, inalienable, from Jefferson in the Declaration of Independence. Those are civil liberties. They are part and parcel of being human. And they cannot be abridged either by law, constitution, or judicial interpretation. Does that mean that civil liberties are always absolutely upheld? No. Alright? We have a long history, and we're going to talk about some of that, and certainly we'll talk a lot about our civil rights. But civil liberties, that's the idea, right? This is part of our humanity. They are limitations on the power of government. John Locke, right, says if there is natural law, then there are natural rights. This is what he's talking about. And so it's a little confusing because we're talking about civil liberties, and I say this is distinct from civil rights, and then I'm talking about rights. I understand. But they are distinct. Civil liberties, we're dealing with those things that make us human, what John Locke would call natural rights, what Thomas Jefferson would say inalienable. The Bill of Rights, also that word again, rights, right? Those are civil liberties. First of all, remember there was a big debate about that at the Constitutional Convention. Do we even need it, right? All these separation of powers, the fact that there's a federal government system, which we probably need to talk a little bit about that according to some people who looked at your workbooks from last week. There's a real question, but basically the anti-federalists, specifically in the state of New York, said we're not going to ratify this Constitution unless there is a Bill of Rights that is quickly attached to it. And so they said, we'll do it right away. Jefferson and Madison put together a whole bunch of them. I've already talked to you about that. They get condensed down by Congress. There's a lot of debate over where commas go and how they're put together and all that sort of stuff. And then there are 10 that are passed in 1791. Right away. It's the very first thing Congress does. The second thing they do is they set up the judicial branch. Okay? These are the Judiciary Act of 1791. We're still under it. Okay? Important pieces of legislation. The First or Eighth Amendments guarantee specific rights and liberties, whereas the Ninth kind of says, so we didn't list them all. Just because we listed these doesn't mean that's all there is. There are other rights. Some of the things that the courts have talked about over time are things like marriage, procreation, okay? Things that were not listed there, but still exist. Privacy, okay? The 10th Amendment reserves rights and powers to states and to people, in that order, okay? So it says specifically, anything that's not given to the federal government is a power of the state, okay, that power part, or to the people respectively. So if the state doesn't claim that power, then the people have that power, okay? And so that's why we see a lot of times local governments doing something, and then states maybe step in and say, nope, we're going to take that power back from you, because they get to do that. We're going to talk only about the First Amendment today. Just so you know, in law school, there are entire semester-long courses over the First Amendment. We're going to talk about it today in class. So I don't expect you to know everything about the First Amendment. This is a decent primer on it. The First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, semicolon. In the first phrase of the First Amendment, there is contradiction. In the very first phrase of the First Amendment, there is contradiction. Or abridging the freedom of speech, comma, or of the press, comma, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble, comma, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. These are considered the first rights. They're in the First Amendment, but they're political rights. Right? Something Jefferson and Madison would claim are absolutely necessary for democracy to work. Freedom of speech. Okay? So when drafting the First Amendment, Jefferson is going to write that there should be a wall of separation between church and state. He writes this to the Baptist Assembly, Danbury Baptist Assembly. Danbury, yeah, okay, sorry. Small little blip in my head for a second. Danbury Baptist Association, because they say, hey, look, you know, local governments put a lot on us, and we've been kept out of things. How is this going to protect us? And Jefferson says, I believe there needs to be a wall of separation between church and state so local governments cannot persecute you, Baptists. So, that's one way to look at it, a wall of separation. However, the courts have generally come down on the side of accommodation rather than a wall of separation. Now, look, either one is a legitimate argument, okay? There should be absolutely nothing to do, right? A legitimate argument. It's also a legitimate argument to say that there has to be some accommodation for the religious beliefs of others, of people in general, right? By government. And so what that means is the argument behind that is government is made up of people. People have religious beliefs, and therefore there has to be some sort of accommodation for humans who have religious beliefs. And the First Amendment is saying you get to free exercise it And if you're in government, you also get to free exercise religion, right? Okay? See? Starts getting tricky, right? Because government also cannot establish a religion. And that's what we're talking about here. In Lemon versus Kurtzman in 1971, the court ruled, and this is really important, it's 1971, this is 2021. There are many famous jurists, Andrew Scalia being one of them, who hate this holding. And nonetheless has signed off on opinions that use this as their basis time and again. Because it is the best test they can come up with. Okay? A government act must be secular, have a secular purpose. What is secular? Non-religious. Easy peasy. Non-religious. Have a secular purpose. Neither advance nor inhibit religion. Neither advance nor inhibit religion. And there cannot be excessive government entanglement with religion. Let me give you an example. Can Norman, Oklahoma hold a Christmas parade? Yes, it can. You say, but Christmas is a religious holiday. It is. Is it also a secular holiday? Yes, there is Santa Claus. And there's commerce, which is probably more important. Okay? So there is a secular purpose. So that means that the city of Norman can absolutely have a Christmas parade, and they don't have to call it a holiday parade. They can call it a Christmas parade. They can choose to call it a holiday parade to be more inclusive to the people that live in their city. But they can call it whatever they want. Can the city of Norman have a Kwanzaa parade? Yes. Okay? The city of Norman can have a parade even if the holiday the parade is for is specifically religious, as long as the parade is not. Right? Does that make sense? Secular purpose. It can neither advance nor inhibit religion. This is where it gets a little tricky. You guys may not know this, but I'm a member of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. I worship online on Thursdays. I often wear my Pastafarian hat. And so if I want to have a float in the Norman Christmas parade that celebrates my religion, can the city of Norman keep me from doing that? Absolutely not. Okay? If I want to have a float in the Norman Christmas parade that says Christmas is, a terrible holiday because my religious beliefs say that you should not have this sort of commercialization. Can I do that? Yes. Right? It can neither inhibit nor advance. But that also means this. If I am a member of St. John's Episcopal Church, and we have a float, and we sing Christmas chorals, specifically, that are religious in nature, as part of our float. Can we be stopped from doing that? No. Okay? It has to be open to everyone. There can be restrictions on that. So, for example, probably Ben Franklin's Air Society, in which all nudists are involved, could be, gotta keep some clothes on, it's family event, right? We have certain codes. Okay? But it cannot inhibit nor advance a particular religion. The third bit of this is no excessive entanglement with religion. That means that the city of Norman cannot go around and say, now what exactly songs are you singing? Here are the prescribed songs you can sing. They can't check those things. Okay? So they can't get entangled with religion in that way. And a lot of these government acts end up failing right here. Because it says, well, we're going to give vouchers for people to go to private schools, but those vouchers can only be used in ways that are secular in nature, and so we're going to come to your school and check it out. Nope, excessive entanglement. Okay? And that's why vouchers are so tough. Right? This is why there's a lot of debate about that, because you can't do this last bit, so how do you know? There have been some other cases, obviously, that have followed this. In 1980, the Lemon Test invalidated the Kentucky law requiring the posting of the Ten Commandments in public school classrooms. Specifically, the Kentucky law said every public school classroom must have a posting of the Ten Commandments. Challenged, and the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. You are clearly advancing a particular religion. The argument, just as the argument here in 2005, is that the Ten Commandments are not religious, they're secular. The argument is they are not religious, they are secular, because they are a code by which to live by. The problem with that is the first commandment. Anybody tell me what it is? What? What?
Number one is like God above all else.
Love God above all others. Have no other gods before him. Her God. Right? So it says God in the first line. Therefore, religious. Right? And this is what the Supreme Court, in their opinions, basically said. It's clearly religious. Okay? Now, in 2005, they found that this giant appliance outside of the Kentucky courthouse, the Supreme Court of Kentucky, that had the Ten Commandments inscribed on it, was unconstitutional and a violation of the Establishment Clause. But they said the same sort of statue on the Texas Capitol grounds was okay. What's the difference? Has anybody ever been to the Texas Capitol grounds in Austin? You have? Tell me what it's like.
Big building.
Well, okay, the Texas Capitol is a big building, but what about the grounds? Huh?
They're pretty well segregated from everything else. You can't like walk on it. All that is pretty well.
They're what?
Regard.
Well, last time I was there, they were not. It's a giant park. Right? And so there are things like there's monuments to the Alamo. There's the Spanish Constitution. Right? There's Sam Houston. Okay? And so it's been a while since I've been to Austin like that. But there's a giant park that's behind the state capitol grounds. And so the Supreme Court said in a 5-4 decision, that means it's closed, right? They said, while yes, the Ten Commandments in itself is religious, in this setting, as a part of all these other monuments, it's part of the culture of the people of Texas, and so it stands. Because there are lots of other things there, right? And so, because there are lots of other things there, yes, this thing is religious in nature. But there are lots of things there, and it goes toward the culture of the people. Okay? Accommodation. Whereas outside the Kentucky courthouse, it was all by itself. Supreme Court was the supreme law of Kentucky, and it indicated that this was the law of Kentucky. Also snuck in by one judge in the middle of the night. That actually happened in Alabama as well. The other judge was very upset. Talk about Alabama in another time. So, the First Amendment also includes free exercise. Free exercise. And that's kind of what this accommodation is about, right? Government cannot interfere with religious practice. So, for example, me telling you that I'm a member of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster, and you should totally check it out online, is okay. However, is there a setting where it would not be okay? Is there a setting where it would not be okay for me as a teacher to say that? Well, I'll give you a hand.
Melly.
Huh? Yes.
It would only be like wrong if you were like coming up, like saying if you're preaching it to us.
If I was what?
If you were like preaching it to us.
I could actually probably preach a little. Okay? I couldn't make your grade dependent on it. Okay? I could not make a government benefit dependent on it. If you do this, then you can get 5 extra points on the final exam. Right? I mean, I can't do that. Another situation where I cannot do that is if you were children. If this is a high school classroom, a junior high classroom, an elementary school classroom, I cannot talk about my religion. Why? Yes?
Impressionable minds.
Yes, impressionable minds. And this is where we have this civil liberty that is absolutely not written in the Constitution, but this idea that parents get to help form their children's religious views, and that government does not. You're adults. Whether you're 18 or not, you're in this classroom, you're an adult. Okay? Does that make sense? Whenever I was in the 5th grade, I came home one day, and I'm standing in the yard with my dad, and I say, Daddy, did you know that God is in the rocks, in the trees, in the air, and just in me and you and everywhere? And my father, who was a very open person, said, Melody, did you come up with that yourself? And I said, no, Mrs. Gates told me that. Mrs. Gates was my 5th grade teacher. My father was livid. He was furious. Okay? My father had no problem with me exploring what my own religious beliefs were. But to have a 5th grade teacher talk about what God was to me meant that she was infringing upon his parental rights. Does that make sense? Several religious practices have been ruled to not have constitutional protection. You'll notice a lot of these have to do, just so you know, with minors. Snake handling by minors. Polygamy because of the practice of marrying minors to older men. Restriction of medical care to minors. So it may be that in your religion you do not believe there should be any blood transfusions or surgeries or extra medical care. That's fine. But if you're under the age of 18, you cannot consent by law to that. You cannot consent as a 17-year-old to testing your faith by handling a snake. They say, nope, you're still a child. You can't do that. Now, you turn 18 years old, go for it. Okay? The other one is the use of illegal drugs. And this is Oregon versus Smith. In Oregon versus Smith, the Supreme Court, there was a case where Smith, who worked as a drug counselor for the state of Oregon, was a member of the Native American Church. What do you know about the Native American Church? Anyone? Yes. What? Coyote. Okay, who was it founded by, do you know? Quanah Parker, right? So Quanah Parker, who was the last chief of the Comanches, okay, founds the Native American Church, kind of a hybrid of, Christianity and Native beliefs. But the reason why he uses peyote as a sacrament, as part of this church, a sacrament, in other words, something that you do as a way to, be obedient or to talk to God in this particular case, was because he was injured, he was administered peyote, he had a vision, and so vision quest became a part of this church that he founded, the use of peyote in his way. Smith was a member of the Native American church, he used peyote on a vision quest, and then tested positive for peyote and was fired from his job. Supreme Court said, totally fine. Okay? If you'll notice, it says Oregon versus Smith. That's because the Supreme Court of Oregon said, no, that's an infringement on his what? Religious liberty. But then Oregon appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court found for Oregon, basically saying that the drug trade, which, as we know, has little to do with peyote, but the drug trade itself was such a danger that for this reason, it overrode, this government interest overrode this religious liberty. In some ways, Oregon Smith has been overturned by specific state laws, by RFRA, in part, okay? But it has never been overturned in terms of law as far as the U.S. Supreme Court is concerned. The next part, we're moving on from religion to speech and press. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. But that does not mean just like with religious liberty, just like with the establishment of religion. It does not mean it's absolute. Doesn't mean no limits. Right? But that concept is something that cannot be abridged. So, we're going to talk about the limits in just a second. But I want you guys to think about what Noam Chomsky says. If we don't believe in freedom of expression for people that we despise, then we don't believe in it at all. If you don't believe in freedom of expression for people that we absolutely disagree with, then you don't believe in it. Because that's what it is. Now, like I said, there are some limits. One limit is on obscenity. This is the Miller test for obscenity. Now, Potter Stewart, the Supreme Court justice, says he knows it when he sees it. But they have another test. It's only obscene if the average person, okay, so not someone who's particularly sensitive, or not someone who's particularly desensitized. The average person applying contemporary community standards. In other words, applying the standards of today. And community, just so you know, generally means like state, okay? Or large metropolitan area. It doesn't mean small town, okay? Community usually means state. And contemporary means now, not 1833. Finds that the work taken as a whole, so not just this scene, not just this line, not just this description, appeals to the prurient interest. Can anybody tell me what prurient is? Good word. It's your first vocabulary word of the day. Prurient. Sexually perverse. Specifically, sexually perverse. Okay? And that's an important thing to note. And it's an important thing to note about law in the United States. Obscenity does not apply to violence. It's sexually perverse. And, so that's the first part, and, so it has to meet all of these, the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct that's specifically defined by state law, or specifically prohibited by state law. So, if I were to be writing a book, or producing a screenplay, and one of my characters says, yeah, you know my uncle, he liked to have sex with goats. Okay? While specifically prohibited by Oklahoma state law, I did not do what? Describe it or depict it. I didn't have a scene where that happened. Right? I have to actually depict or describe in a patently offensive way something that has been specifically prohibited, defined by state law. If in my book I say, you know, these 3 people regularly had sex with 12-year-old girls, while illegal, right? I'm not describing it or depicting it. But let's say I do. Average person. It's not okay to have sex with children as an adult, or children with other children. We'll talk about that later. But the point is, right, adults, specifically illegal, specifically defined to have sex with children. But in my book, I specifically describe it. In my movie, it's the center point of the movie. It should still be okay. If the work, taken as a whole, has serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. So in other words, Lolita, right? Nabokov, serious literary value. This is also something that's important. See that first bit? Average person applying contemporary community standards? That's not the average person applying contemporary community standards to whether it has serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. This is completely separate, right? This has value even if the state of Oklahoma says it does not. Okay? So it's separate. So this is a very tough test, right? For something to be considered so obscene that is not protected by the First Amendment. There's some pretty hard rules as far as speech is concerned and press. No prior restraint. New York versus Minnesota and New York Times versus U.S. In both of those cases, the Supreme Court says you cannot censor a newspaper, a media outlet from publishing. When we talk about things, and we will when we get to media, we'll talk about some disinformation, right? The government cannot censor that. Now, if after the fact it causes harm, you can then be prosecuted for it. But it cannot be no prior restraint. You cannot be stopped from putting that out there. Political speech is protected. Political speech is protected. Now again, this is from Twitter or this is from the government. Can Twitter ban your political speech?
Yes.
Yes, it's a corporation. Facebook can ban you. Facebook can get rid of your disinformation. Instagram can kick you off their platform. Okay? The government cannot censor you. Okay? The government can't censor you. Symbolic speech is protected. This is Texas versus Johnson, 1989. How many of you, well, this week you're going to talk a little bit about flag burning, I believe. In Texas versus Johnson, Johnson was burning a flag on the steps of the Texas Capitol grounds. Again, a hotbed for the youth, right? He was burning a flag on the steps of the Texas Capitol grounds, and he's listing out what he sees as the atrocities of the United States in terms of Nicaragua, the actions of the U.S. in mining the harbors of Nicaragua, denouncing the Reagan administration, burning the American flag. He is arrested under a Texas statute about flag desecration. The Supreme Court says, no, clearly political speech. He is clearly expressing an opinion about the actions of the United States, and therefore you cannot use this broad statute to arrest him for that. Some of you last week suggested that hate speech should be banned. Yes, sir? No. Hate speech is protected. He said incredibly hateful things. Now, not in this room, because I have my own rules. But we have rules of civility in here. I could put parameters, even though this is a government-run classroom, right? I can put parameters on our speech so that we're civil one to another, just like in your lab. Things are about to get a little heated, by the way. And so we can put parameters there and say that's not acceptable in a learning environment, right? But hate speech cannot be prosecuted by the government for saying things that are hateful. In this case, Brandenburg was at a KKK rally. He talked about killing people. You guys the color of their skin? He talked about what ought to happen to people. You know the color of their skin? And what ought to happen to the people that supported him. He's arrested, and the Supreme Court said, you can say that so long as there's not imminent danger that comes to that. We'll talk about that in just a second. There's a much higher standard to prove libel or slander if it's a public person. New York Times versus Sullivan. If it is a public person and I say something about that person that is untrue and it harms their reputation, then they also have to prove that I did it with malice. Okay? However, if I say something about you, Michaela, if I say something about Michaela right here in this class, that harms her. You know, maybe it makes her not want to come back to class. Maybe it makes her break her down. Maybe it makes her feel uncomfortable in front of other students that it's untrue. And whether I said it because I was joking, right? Or whether I said it because I had some bad information, or whether I said it because I didn't think it was that big of a deal. And I thought it was true. Or it doesn't really matter. The point is, I could be held liable for that. You understand? Because he's not a public person. I'm going to make her public, but. So, there are limits on speech and press. Time, place, and manner. And I want us to have a parade right now down Lincoln. We cannot do that. Because we cannot get a permit. That said, if I want us to have a, hey, you know, this is what it is to protest parade. And I get us a permit, they can't deny us a permit for having a, we want to protest parade. They have to give us one. Okay? Time, place, and manner restrictions. They can't just do it, but they also can't restrict us from doing it as long as they put the public safety in place. So on campus, sometimes you will see people on soapboxes, right? And women, just so you know, they will call you harlots, right? Especially if you're, you know, walking somewhere. Doesn't really matter what you're wearing, honestly. And they have got a permit to come on campus and preach. So they can. Your choice to argue with them. You can keep on walking. National security. If it causes a clear and present danger to the security of the United States, then you cannot publish it or say it. Now, you can't be stopped from doing it. Again, no prior restraint, but you can prosecute competed for it after the fact. Okay? Hey, you have troops that are gonna land tomorrow in this location at this time. Does NBC News causes a problem? Yeah, causes a problem. So, Valerie Plain is a CIA spy. Causes a problem? Causes a problem. I mean, every single contact that she has is now in danger, and that causes national interest problems, national security issues. Conflict with other liberties, such as the right to fair trial. I have a right to a fair trial, and that wins over the right of the strategy to report on that trial. Yeah.
I'm just curious. So right now, like there's a lot of files that are being extracted, and so does that infringe the rights of a file?
Right? If they're acting with all speed that they can, then not really. One of the issues that we have in the federal court system, as it is that it's really understaffed. Okay? Especially actually during President Obama, it was very understaffed. He would put out nominations for federal judges, and the Senate just did not come. Right? The federal bench is now fully staffed because President Trump gave it to the Senate, and they solved it. Right? But there's still a massive caseload problem. And there's also a question of, are there actually enough seats? Do you have enough seats? Right? Libel, slander, and incitement I talked about, but incitement I want to talk about specifically. Incitement is if I say something that then causes you to act in a way that harms others. Right? I know you guys hang on my every word. You want to do everything I tell you to do. Right? Yes. We'll go with that. And so, if I were to tell you that yes, we did have to increase tuition this year, it's been a while, but guess what? In the spring, because of all of the pressures on the administration, we're actually going to double tuition. They're having a meeting in Board of Regents right now next door. Let's go. That might incite you, right? Oh, and by the way, there's some, torches and stuff like that outside the door. Grab one.
Let's go.
Right? Incitement, right? I'm directly inciting you to violence. Okay? Whereas, Sarah Palin putting targets on Gabby Gifford's head and putting that out on her website. Courts have said that just because she suggested to her followers, just take heed of that, she's clearly using hyperbole. And this didn't mean for one of her followers to go shoot Gabby Gifford in the head. This is a tough thing to prove. Okay? Obscenity we've already talked about. You also have the right to peaceably assemble. This is even if it's unpopular or hateful. So the Central Society of America versus the Village of Skokie in 1977, the Village of Skokie, which is a primarily Jewish neighborhood, said no. Skinheads. That's what that means, right? Neo-Nazis. You cannot have a parade here. Some of us are Holocaust survivors. The Supreme Court said, you have to let us. You have to let us. Now, if it turns to violence, at that point there's recourse. Right? State the government, this is more important historically. People would write letters that would be read out on the floor of Congress. This is one of the main ways that American Indian tribes really communicated their needs. Okay? But this is not something that's used very often. I'm writing a book right now, Liberties, the electors, 2016 election, which has been on hold for a while. Dragged on. But it's an example of people petitioning. I'm sending a letter and I'm saying, please don't do this, or please do this. Right? So, I didn't take attendance, so Eric, will you take attendance for the conclusion? I meant to do that really early on and I didn't.
It's live.
You got it live? Okay, finish the slide.